Welcome to the Black Knight Nation podcast. I'm your host, Sal Interdonato. The Black Knight Nation podcast is sponsored by Higher Echelon. Higher Echelon is a world-class
Black Knight Nation podcast. I'm your host, Sal Interdonato. The Black Knight Nation podcast is sponsored by Higher Echelon. Higher Echelon
is a world-class consulting firm that trains employees in sports psychology secrets that drastically improve work performance. Founder Joe Ross is retired Army who played and later coached for the cadets and puts that experience to use for his clients. We thank Joe Ross for sponsoring this podcast. We're sorry for the audio there, and we'd like to welcome in our special guest, Rob Healy. Rob, thanks for joining us tonight. Really appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure, Sal. Thank you for all you do for Army football. Really appreciate it over all these years.
Thanks. I know that we when I was on the beat, we might have exchanged some emails, or maybe I might have bumped into you maybe once at one of those Army football club functions. Really appreciate you having you on. And man, wanted to talk to you. Usually how we start these podcasts is basically how it all started for you at West Point and how you were able to get to West Point first and then your football career. How do you end up at West Point? How did it all start off for you?
Well, I guess I got to credit my brother in a way. So my brother was 1 year older than I was, and he went to the Air Force Academy. So when I went to high school out in California, Arcadia, California, the mighty Arcadia Apaches. I started getting recruited by various schools, and maybe or maybe not. I don't know how I would have reacted with an academy recruiting me, but because of my brother and going to the Air Force Academy, I knew a lot about, or maybe enough to be dangerous about the academies, and I wasn't afraid of an academy. And also, I kind of wanted to maybe have my own footsteps and not just go where my brother went. So when Army started recruiting me, I was very open-minded to it. I wanted to take a recruiting trip to New York. I thought that was cool. We were from a family, didn't have a lot of money. I hadn't been to New York. And so I took a recruiting trip, and then I wasn't ready for what happened. I just it really got to me, the whole, walking around West Point, the history, the service mentality for, one's country, putting your country above yourself. The people I met, the coaches, it just, really captured a young 18-year-old kid's imagination, I guess. And I was hooked. And I came home and I told my mom, hey, I'm going to West Point. I think she was shocked. Many of my teachers were shocked. I was kind of an independent California kid, if you will. And suddenly I'm, headed off to West Point. So that's how it happened.
Wow. And then I guess we were talking a little bit before we started the podcast about Beast Barracks and before you become a football player, right?
Right.
The introduction to West Point. What was that like for you? And you hear stories of the past with players, coming right out of Beast Barracks to the practice field. That's changed a little bit now with Army, and even coming out of military training, after your plebe year and going right to the football field. That's changed a lot with summer classes under Jeff Monken. But what was that like for you? And what was that a little bit of adjustment for you, or did you kind of pretty much adjust to that right away?
I was pretty big adjustment. I mean, I was from a single, parent home, being raised by just my mom. It was a big adjustment. So we were pretty, free. She was a policewoman, so she was at work a lot. So we were pretty free to do what we want. And then suddenly every second of one's time is managed by somebody. It was a major league adjustment for me. But you just kind of go with the flow and adjust. And I remember, by the way, the first cadet I met when I came to West Point was Rick Dowk, who's, Army DB, standing there. He was the man. He wasn't the man in the red sash, but he was wearing a red sash when I met him. And he just looked like Adonis. I thought, wow, this guy's, 6'3", 6'4", good looking guy, stud. So I just kind of wanted to be him, and, hung in there. And so the plebe year was kind of just hanging in there. And then later on, you wanted to do more than just hang in. You wanted to accelerate and do well. So. but it was a big change.
How did things work out for you on the football field? How do you your freshman year, and how does your introduction to Army football go?
Well, freshman year, it was the year before Coach Young, so Army was really struggling, but it was a drop back and scramble type of an offense, and that worked very well for me. That's what I was recruited for. There were nine. I guess I was shocked. There were 9 quarterbacks, 9 freshman quarterbacks when I showed up, and some of them a lot bigger and taller than I was, and I was just like, wait a minute, I thought you just recruited me, or maybe I thought maybe 2 or 3, but I wasn't ready for 9. And I just kept battling and hanging in there, and I ended up starting for the JV team, and at various different points in times in the season, I was like maybe got as high as 3rd string on varsity. I did travel to a couple of varsity games, but I never got in on varsity as a freshman. And then in fact, I think I got injured in a JV game later in the year, so that kind of took the opportunity of any varsity play off the table. So
I was talking to a guy who you know rather well, Ron Rice, one of your teammates. He was a center for you, and he was telling me about how your game back then would be very effective now in Army's offense. More so running the football as well as throwing the football, almost being that dual threat quarterback. What do you think that? Do you agree with him? Do you think that your game back then is equivalent to what they're doing right now, or how you see were the offenses are they that much different now?
Well, it's an interesting question. I don't know. I feel like these guys today are like, rock stars and have gone way beyond what we were doing. But I guess I do know one thing is that I was, a thrower. So by the way, my sophomore year, there was a certain list of quarterbacks, and it was a drop back attack. And that year we were 2-9 and threw the heck out of the ball, and boom, we go to the wishbone, and not one quarterback was the same guy, only me. And they brought in all these like wishbone studs like Nate Sassman and what have you. But what I learned is that the wishbone could be very, very effective when you mirror it with a passing attack. If you look at Army's offense under Makeda, Ronnie Makeda, you saw a lot of that. And then my senior year, we threw the ball quite a bit more, and we scored a lot of points. And we had great running backs. I had in the backfield, Clarence Jones, Bill Lampley, and Doug Black. I mean, it may be one of the best, 3 backfield, maybe ever at Army. It's crazy how good they were. But we could run and throw, and it made for a very successful attack. Today, it matters what year we're talking about. They don't throw as much today as we did. They don't throw as much as Makeda did. But I don't think, if I'm guessing with Jeff Monken or Brent Davis, it's not because they wouldn't. If they had the certain personnel, I think they'd probably do that, because it can be, you see when Army throws, and when they execute, they are very effective with it.
I was talking yesterday to an Army grad, and we were just talking about the season coming up and the weapons that they have in their offense. And yeah, they have the fullback stable is strong once again. The quarterbacks are deep as maybe it's ever been at West Point. And then you look at a guy like a Terrell Robinson, their slot back, who's going to be a sophomore, and like, man, if I've never called a play in my life, Rob, but if I'm Army, the first series against Georgia State this week, I find a way to get him on the edge and make that defense be aware that Terrell Robinson can be a game breaker. That's just me. So
yeah, I got to tell you, as soon as I saw that young man last year, and I saw him just run a couple plays, I was kind of like, wow! Like, I have not seen an athlete like this. We've seen some great running backs, but he's a special kind of an athlete with a lot of lateral movement capability where he can really make people miss. And I think it's going to be exciting to watch him develop. They had a lot of guys back there last year, and so maybe Terrell didn't get the ball as much as maybe we all would have thought. But he's going to be a big part of their attack going forward. I mean, he just has to be. He's a special guy. And yeah, we were talking about the quarterback situation. It's just stunning to me, like how many very capable quarterbacks they have who played, who have experience, who've done well. You just don't normally have that, and so that's I know Coach Monken's talked about it in almost every article, and they've got to feel very fortunate. They could probably put 5 different guys on the field and do very well, maybe more. I don't know. There's probably plebes coming in that are capable too. So God only knows, but it's incredible deep there.
Yeah, I think that while we're on the topic of quarterbacks, just real quick, while we're talking about the current Army quarterbacks, I think that you have to give a lot of credit to the quarterbacks coach, Cody Worley, right? Because last year, especially during COVID, when you're rotating quarterbacks back and forth, I mean, what a job he did with that group. And I don't know if he gets enough credit for the success that they had last year, but certainly deserves a shout out for just being. I've just talking to the current quarterbacks that are there now. They hold him very high. It was only his first year at West Point last year too.
It's incredible. I mean, it's a great job, and every one of those guys came in and executed. There wasn't one of those like 5 guys that came in and played where you were kind of like, oh no, he's turning the ball over. He can't run the offense. I mean, they just kept rolling them in, and that is hard to do as a coach. I coach out here, and to have that many guys ready to play and play at a high level is just amazing. So great props to him, and I'm sure he's probably got his hands full this year trying to get all those guys reps in practice. I don't know how they're doing that, but I'm sure they're finding a way.
I don't know either. Coach Monk at the beginning of the preseasons, like he wanted to give everybody like a fair share that was coming back. And I guess, once you get to game week, you have the guys who are going to get a little bit more than others, but to split it up almost 6 ways in practice. I mean, I don't know how you divide that up. I'm sure they found a way, and we're really looking forward to seeing what they're going to bring to the field on Saturday against Georgia State. If we can go back to your football career a little bit,
sure.
What do you think stands out for you? As I know, the Peach Bowl is probably a memory of yours that you'll never forget. Are there any? We'll get to that in a little bit, but are there any games that stand out for you other than the Peach Bowl as far as a really fond memories for you?
Well, probably 2 others that just come to mind right away, which is my junior year. Nate Sassman got hurt against Syracuse, and we came back the next week. It was just a huge game against Air Force at night at Mikey, first game ever at Mikey, and so he was out. He had broken ribs, so I started and played. He came in for like 2 plays in that game, which is kind of a funny story, but so the pressure was on me. It was a big game. It was kind of key in determining our bowl status. And, I had one of the better games of my career, and we had a lot of drives. Not all of them ended up in the end zone. Stopa, I think, kicked 5 field goals that night. And we had a heck of a game. And my brother, who was a senior at Air Force that year, he was there. So it was a very, very special game for me, and that it may stand out above all other games. I don't know. It was a heck of a fun game. And then, my senior year, I don't know if you've heard about this game, Sal, but we played Memphis right after they tied Alabama at Mikey, and a storm hit the night before, and it was not the night before, it's right before the game, and the snow was coming down so hard they could not get the snow off the field, and so all they could do was shovel the sidelines, so you could barely see the sidelines, and they had cones out there to try to see the yard markers. It was crazy. It was like nothing I've ever played in my entire life, and so I would say 12 plus inches of snow on the field while we're playing. And we absolutely blew out Memphis. It was crazy. Charlie Moses, who actually died shortly after graduating in a helicopter accident, he came out to warm-ups, and he was wearing for some reason he wore grass cleats, and he told Coach Young, hey, coach, I have grip in these grass cleats. And we were all wearing turf and we were slipping around because the snow got impacted up in the turf cleats. So Coach Young, he changed everything instantaneously. He told everybody to go to the locker room. There was going to be no pregame talk. Everyone changed their shoes. And Memphis didn't bring grass cleats. They knew they were playing on turf. And we had traction and they didn't. And they were like on ice skates. I mean, we just blew them, we destroyed them. We ran for a lot of yards, threw for a lot of yards. Everybody was happy, and we blew them out. So that game was just such a fun game. Snow in the face mask, snow in the helmet.
Yeah.
It was crazy. So maybe those two.
Yeah, I was present for that snow game. I think 2012 against Fordham, right in late October. And I thought that was Rob. I thought that was the only snow game in Army history at Mikey Stadium, and I'm completely wrong by that. You changed my knowledge of that. I appreciate.
I was at that game, and I can tell you, yes, there was a ton of snow during that game. This Memphis one, look back in the archives. There was more snow then. It was insane. I really have never seen. I don't know if I've ever seen a football game even played with that much snow on the field. It was crazy. Anyway, it was fun.
I've told this story a couple times. I didn't get out of West Point that night. The trees were down. I didn't get out of the press box late, and I slept in the press box that night.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, I think I slept on the press box floor. I could be wrong. Maybe in one of those chairs that rolls around that you can't really get comfortable in. But
oh man,
yeah, that's one. I mean, that's one of my top 10 experiences as an Army football beat writer, no doubt. So you had your own snow game story, so that's awesome. Talk about the end of that senior year for you, and the Navy game, and then leading up to the Peach Bowl.
Well, the Navy game was brutal because I got hurt in it on a play on the goal line and dislocated my shoulder, and it was just obviously very upsetting. We were a very good team that certainly expected to win that game. It was close, but we didn't win it, so no excuse, right? That's what West Point teaches you. But fortunately, there was quite a bit of time between the Navy game and the bowl game. And so I couldn't really practice for a week or two there, but I got to practice and I was able to play in the game. And then the Peach Bowl, I was, fit to be tied. I was pretty fired up. The whole team was before the game. We were, there were some comments made about how they were going to run us off the field and what have you. And so the Army team, and led by, our captain, Kirk Gutierrez, who made a comment at the pregame get together, was basically like, we're coming for you. And if you know Kirk Gutierrez, when you hear that from him, it can be pretty intimidating. So, it was a war of a game. The defense played out of their minds. Young kid, Peel Chronister, filled in, not so young anymore, but filled in on an injury that we had, and had, I think 2 interceptions, and then he knocked the ball on the last play of the game, knocked the ball out of David Thompson's hand he took a pass, and they tried to win the game, go for 2, and he knocked the ball out of their hand, and so that was it. We won the game. So it was tremendous, and it was crazy because it had rained in Atlanta, and it was in that old Fulton County Stadium, and so it was really a mud bowl. And a lot of crazy things happen when it's that muddy. One funny story is that at halftime, everything I was wearing was soaked through and through. My socks, my shoes, everything. So it was a lot of weight with the water, even the shoulder pads. So good old Gene Benner and the equipment man at the time, Moose, they changed everything I was wearing: shoes, socks, underwear, pads. So I came out in the second half light and clean and ready to go and warm, which was a good thing too. So I think that probably helped me a little bit, being just, take 20 pounds off my back and be able to run. So, but it was a lot of fun. And then of course the joke that Coach Young makes about the game is that, he tells me, Healy, you didn't throw a pass in the game practically. The only guys that threw passes were Jones and Lampley on pitch passes, and we scored on both of those. Scott Spellman caught one, and Benny White caught another one. So it was and to have the gumption to call two pitch passes, it was just an incredible game called by Coach Young. And I don't know if people don't really know inside of the game. Coach Young moved the read on the wishbone. He kept moving the read. So he'd run inside triple option and outside triple option, where we were changing who had what responsibility on the defense. And it really messed Illinois up. You could hear them yelling at each other. And I told Coach Young after the game, I'm like, okay, I don't know if everybody knows, but I know what you did. I know the game you called. And, he probably deserved the MVP. He called an incredible game. So it was great. It was fun. A lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, what a memory. When you think back, just the details that you still have from that game, right? I mean, and I guess the Peach Bowl MVP, is it plaque trophy, or do you still have that somewhere really close? Or
it's a trophy. It's actually in this office. It's a trophy. The arm is missing on it. The arm got whacked off, so maybe that's appropriate for the number of injuries I had while I was at Army, but. Yeah, it's a great memory. One of my fondest memories, you mentioned Ron Rice earlier, was watching Ron Rice and Donnie Smith running and diving in the mud and sliding after the game, just celebrating. And, that was it for us. None of us, even though I'd say Donnie Smith probably could have played pro football if they had the rules that they have now, and maybe Craig Stopa too. But that was it. That was our last game. We never played again. So it's sort of seared into your mind, those last memories.
I remember I covered the 2010 Armed Forces Bowl, and Army beat SMU then, and you had the same thing. You had seniors that were going out in their final game, and at that point, they didn't have the history against Navy. They weren't able to beat Navy at that point. So having guys like Steve Anderson go out as a winner in a bowl game. I mean, I don't think there's anything better than that in your career, right, Rob? To have that final game in a postseason atmosphere and then to be a winner, and just the celebration afterwards must have been insane.
Well, it was spectacular. It was really fun. Atlanta put on. I mean, they know how to put on a bowl game. I'll tell you that. They put on a great bowl game, a great time for us, and then. The night after, it was New Year's night after the game. And side note, the '86 Bears were practicing in Atlanta for the Super Bowl. And so we went to this nightclub in Atlanta, Confetti's it's called. I don't know, probably still there. And my brother, as a character, saw McMahon and McMichael walking into Confetti's, and he ran over to him and he said, "Hey, did you watch the Peach Bowl today?" And they said, yeah. And they go, "Well, that's my brother, and he was the quarterback, and la la la." And they said, "Well, come with us." And so we walked into Confetti's with McMahon and McMichael and Dan Hampton, and hung out the whole night with them and had a blast. And so, you add all this craziness up of the game and the trip down there and winning, and I think the team played very well in all facets. Not just Peel on the defense, but the whole defense played well. Made some big sacks on Trudeau by Jim Brock and Bobby Kleinapple and those guys. And you add all that memory up, it's quite a memory. I'll take it to my grave.
Not being a follower of Army football back then, I was younger, but just to hear that game and just what went into that game, I think that might be a game that doesn't get maybe enough credit in Army history. Yeah, there's all these stories. Army's history, football history, spans so long, right, Rob?
Yeah.
And it's a game that might be, it's a bowl win, but maybe hasn't really gotten. I'm so glad that you've come on and shed some light on that game, because I actually have had Kirk Gutierrez on this podcast. I've had Scott Spellman on this podcast, and they talk about the history and the games. I just think that right now, Army fans are so into the current product of Army football, right? But there's so much past and to me, Rob, it's not necessarily the national championships and the Heisman trophies of the 40s and the undefeated seasons of the 58. Yeah, that's a great part of the history, but there was a lot of stuff, a lot of good that happened too in between there and now. So I really appreciate it. So much good insight to that game, and before and after. a lot of good stories to tell, no doubt.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and that continuum. I mean, in my mind, it's the continuum of Army football where I can go talk to a guy like Stitchway or Pete Dawkins or whatever, and then I'm talking to Kurt, and then I'm talking to young guys like he's not so young anymore, but like Andrew Jusky or Rick Roper, or guys that I know and that are friends of mine, and then even I just got a letter from Christian Anderson from the team this year, just talking about the history of Army football. What a special letter that was, by the way. What a wonderful young man he is. That continuum, that brotherhood, Sal, is I don't know what to say. It's really what it's all about. It's very special. It's like nowhere else, and we all cherish it. I know that we cherish it.
Yeah, Christian is one of those quarterbacks in position to potentially be the starter in Saturday's opener. Now you after your career is over, did you do some GA coaching at Army, or what happened after your football career was over?
Yeah, so I spent 9 years in the Army after, the first year I was a GA coach. And since I was there where they implemented the wishbone, it was fun. I got quite a bit of responsibility because not everybody was familiar with the wishbone at the time, and obviously I was, because I had to run it for 2 years there. So that was fun. Enjoyed it quite a bit, and then I came back. So I went out. I was a aviator, commanded a helicopter squadron in the Army in Korea and in California and then in Panama, and then went back. The Army sent me to business school, so I went back to Harvard and got an MBA. And then I came back actually to West Point and I taught in the social department, economics and finance, and I also coached then again for Bob Sutton. So had 2 little stints of coaching there, and then I got out of the military after my time at West Point.
What do you remember? I talked to ex-football players about what they learned on the football field and how it translated into leading troops and being in charge of troops and soldiers. How do you think did that help? Could you tell that really helped you out, your experience as an Army football player when you were out there in the lead, so to speak?
Yeah, well, it really goes back to, maybe 2 individuals for me, Jim Young and Charlie Taff. And I don't know if you saw Charlie recently passed away, which is just a real shame. But, Charlie was a very demanding coach, yet loving, at the same time, but a tough man. I think if people probably commented on how I act in business, they'd probably say I'm pretty demanding, but I do try to be loving too, similar to Charlie. And with Coach Young is a lot of things, but one of the things that I love about Coach Young, he always set the example himself. He never asked us to do anything he wouldn't do. He was incredibly mentally tough and resilient, and I think you need that. And then just the whole mental game. I'll give you one example. So, he wanted less turnovers, and he talked about it constantly. He made the quarterbacks take on, kind of the anti-fumble mantra as part of our personalities. I mean, we were carrying footballs around with each other all the time. I mean, not just in practice and slapping at the ball and yelling at each other, ball control. And, so our senior season, I think we led the nation in fewest turnovers. I believe that's correct. I was told that. I'm not sure if that's true, but, and it just all stemmed from Coach Young and his, his mental focus on the game, which he always used to say, if you can conceive it and believe it, you can achieve it. And I think that conceive and belief part were incredibly important to him, the whole visualization process. And I definitely have taken on those beliefs later on in life, and try to emulate some of the things he did, because I think he was such a spectacular leader. Would have been a general if he would have been a leader in the Army. Just that kind of a talented, special man.
I was I know, talking to other ex-players who also commanded units after their football time. Usually, some of them have bumped into former teammates out while they're serving. Do you have any stories with that? Were there any guys that were your teammates that you were able to serve with while you were in the military?
Yeah, definitely. I was in Korea. I was with Clarence Jones, just lived right across the street from him. And then in Panama, I think I ran into Rob Olses and Mike Sear, defensive lineman on the '84 team. And then I was sent later after Panama to go evaluate Rob Olses's unit in Hawaii. He was an aviation company commander also. And it's a long story for another time, but the helicopter I was on got in a crash. I wasn't flying, thank God. But I was in the back, which in some ways is more terrifying, but got in a crash in the middle of the evaluation. So Olses and I will never forget that whole event as the helicopter mowed its way into the jungle. But everybody was okay. Everybody lived, no serious injuries. So it was all good.
What do you think? Like you said, after 9 years in the military, you left the military and you started a business career. You had already went to Harvard, right? And then you were teaching at West Point also. How do you think that the transition for you, was it kind of a free flowing transition where what you learned in the military at West Point and at Harvard, like you said, you might have been you might be a tough business person, but you kind of learned a little bit from Jim Young, right? So,
well, I did. I went right from being an Army officer down to Wall Street and was an investment banker in the go-go '90s. So I certainly wasn't leading anything when I got to Wall Street. I was a minion and got my little tail kicked down there, drinking from a fire hose for really 2 or 3 years, and worked like a dog, I will tell you. I think maybe perseverance is what I took from that part of my career, and hopefully a willingness to learn, because I definitely learned more in my life in a shorter period of time maybe than ever when I was an investment banker. But then later on, I think, I left investment banking. I went to what's called the buy side private equity, where we buy and sell and build companies. And as you do that, you're leading and dealing with high performance teams. And I think a lot of the lessons from Coach Young, Coach Taft, and my teammates and from Army football have come into play. In fact, I would credit nothing more in my career development than Army football. Army football gets the number one credit for sure when it comes to so many things. Resilience being a big one, because you're going to get knocked down in the business world, and you just got to keep getting back up and trying to learn from your mistakes. And that's been a big reason, I think, why I've iterated with a number of private equity funds, and the most recent one is probably the best and most successful one, because hopefully we've been learning along the way, and Army football obviously playing a huge role in that. So,
yeah, when you say you got a letter from a current player, Christian Anderson, just wondering maybe if what advice might you give, like, guys who are going to be graduating West Point, and some of them who have recently graduated West Point, and when their service time is up, they decide they want to go into the business world. And is there any kind of advice that you could give former players out there now, or guys that are going to graduate soon?
Well, a few things. One is, I thought the MBA helped me a lot, because it kind of took me from an officer, in the military world and understanding that world, to a leader not maybe a leader, but just being introduced to the business world without being quite so naive about it. Because at Harvard, I was around very successful business people for 2 years straight. And even if you're not the brightest guy like myself, you absorb quite a bit from your classmates, just like at West Point. I absorbed at Harvard and my instructors or whatever. So I learned a lot. I think that helped me with the transition into the business world. I say maybe a willingness, like I said earlier, a willingness to learn, because you're going to have to learn a lot in a hurry. And then you get to a point where, it's time for you to take risk and push and try to do things and create in the business world. So I'd say, don't be afraid at some point in time to go out there and push yourself, your situation, and take risk. Because, in the business world, if you want to get ahead, you have to take a certain amount of risk, and you have to believe in yourself, have confidence. And if you just want to, kind of have a stayed and played career, and you go somewhere very safe, I think that's fine. But the upside is less with that, and you have to risk to see success. And I think if nothing else, I think I did take risks along the way, and most of them panned out.
We have a comment that will be posted shortly from someone, Roski21, that says, "Don't forget about the flag football game against Navy."
That's got to be Andrzejewski for Ruski. I'm not sure. I've played in a few alumni, kind of flag football games against Navy. I think he's talking about the one in the Meadowlands that we played in against Phil McConkey and other Navy guys. And I will say, Andrzejewski made a catch in that game. It's one of the greatest catches I've ever seen anywhere, college, NFL, whatever. And so I think he wants me to bring that up. He did make it. The catch was just insane. The diving shoestring bomb that he caught. And by the way, we did spank Navy in both those games, including the one against Staubach out here in Southern California. So it's always good to beat Navy one way or the other, even if we didn't get them in '85.
I was going to ask you about that. Maybe there was a little bit of redemption there from.
Yeah, no, I don't hold a grudge at all. No.
Not at all. Well, maybe we can just talk about Army has put out this project for restoring Mikey Stadium right there on the Les Reservoir side. They want to going to renovate the stadium. Mikey Stadium. You can put Mikey Stadium on any poll as far as a sports venue as one of the most historic, one of the must see, must get to venues. And I know that you were involved in a donation to the restoration project. Just talk about. I mean, this is a field that you shared a lot of memories on back when you played, right, Rob? And now it's kind of, I guess it's going to get a little bit of an update coming up.
Yeah, well, it's the visitor side stands over there, and if you've ever been down underneath there, they've been around a while. I'll just say the locker room down there, they may have renovated it since when I was down there, but it's a little rough. And so with this incredible venue that they already have, they came up with this idea to make it really kind of world class with a complete redo with suites over there and kind of a look-through club that looks both out on the field and on the Les Reservoir. It's pretty stunning. And also, I think eventually offices for the athletic department are over there too. And I saw the early plans, and I don't know, it just kind of captured my imagination. And I hadn't, I'd been kind of giving annually to the A Club and what have you, but I hadn't sort of made like a lifetime gift and things like that. And I thought, I couldn't imagine a better way to kind of get involved. And so, yeah, I'm involved in that. I'm pretty darn proud of it, and I'm pretty happy about the progress they've made. We got to keep going. They got to raise a lot of money. I think it's all in 90 million plus, but they've made a lot of progress lately with I won't name names, but with some very generous individuals who's given a lot of money. And so if you're out there listening, folks, there's a big opportunity to to help the athletic department out and help make Mikey Stadium, great for the next 50 to 100 years. And I think it's a great plan. And I'm, like I said, I'm real excited about it.
I guess it's, in a way, is it you giving back to the program a little bit, or no? Do you look at it that way, or no?
Well, I mean, I guess I do, because for me, I credit all the success in business that I've had. I credit right back to Army football. I really do. It's the number one influence on my life. And so, yeah, it's giving back, but it's also, I just think about those experiences out there on the football field for these young men that are preparing them for later experiences in life that may be battle, may be business, could be a lot of different things. And that process, that whole experience, I want it to be world class. And if you look around at Army, there's a lot of world class facilities. The weight room is fantastic. A lot of the stuff they've done on the home side is great. The indoor practice facility is just stunning. But I think this is maybe one area that is not quite as high speed up there, and so why not? I think it's a great project, and if I can give back by being part of that, it definitely makes me and it makes my family feel good. And while my son is at the academy now, is a good time for that. Yeah, so that's what it's all about.
Nice. Just maybe wrap this up with a little bit, bring it back to current, and how you feel about this team, this 2021 team coming into, they're only a couple days away from opening up the season. We talked about a little bit before the podcast and during the podcast about, some components that they have for this team. And, it's a team that won 9 games last year and returns a lot of stuff. I think I tallied at one point 38 guys who started a game last year are back on this team this year. And that's just, to me, granted, it was a COVID year where guys might have been getting a start here or there. But, I mean, that's an incredible number. They bring back a ton of experience. They bring back a lot of solid players. What are you looking forward to about this year's team?
Well, really everything. I mean, it's a pretty exciting time for Army football, and I'm so glad Coach Monken has stayed on with us. Obviously the depth. I think the defense, Army football. It's interesting if you look at the Wishbone era. There's a couple of different positions we have to be strong, and we've got to be decent in the secondary. And I think he may have one of the best secondaries that he has here. So that's exciting to me, because then what you can do is you can play more man and bring more pressure, which is critical if you want to make big plays and get the offense the ball. So, and then the other thing I think is critical, every year, first game, I sit and I watch the 3 interior offensive linemen. I know everyone is like talking about 6 quarterbacks and what have you, but those 6 quarterbacks can't do much if the guard, the center, and the guard don't move the nose guard out of the way and create seams for the fullback. So I think you'll learn a lot about this team, especially against a tough team like Georgia State. And anybody who knows much about college football these days knows that Georgia State is a big time upcoming program, and you could see what was happening there last year, and they're going to be tough. It's going to be a tough game. So watching what we do to those, and I don't know if they play not or even front, but to those interior linemen early on in the game. And if we're getting movement, if the fullback is getting yards, I think that's a very good sign for the overall season. If we're having trouble, it matters. If their nose guard is the super stud, well, then maybe it's just because, their nose guard's a god and we can't do anything about it. But, it's critical in the wishbone to open up those interior holes, because it leads to all those other opportunities. And so that's where I'll be looking. And I know we've got this, the center's coming back with some experience. I think we graduated 4 starters, but you just said it. There's more guys that have started a lot of games there. So yeah. I'm hopeful you're going to see that movement in the interior line.
I thought there might be I could be wrong, 7 offensive linemen that might have returning guys that might have been in games last year as a starter. That number could be a little off, but still, you look at the guys that you're talking about, those guards are Noah Knapp and Dean Powell, and those are guys who have all seen, they've seen the field. They played a little center every once in a while too when they needed to in games. Noah Knapp certainly has been on the field for some key moments, and so has Dean Powell. So they're seniors now. It's their time to usually I know that Coach Davis was saying he would like to have depth on the offensive line, almost like a hockey line where he can roll in 5, take out the starters. But I mean, when you're going on those long drives, those 16 to 20 play drives, you're not substituting offensive linemen.
No.
So
I mean, those guys.
It's
amazing, by the way. Those guys are so big. That's one way the game has really changed. All those guys are close to 300 pounds, and so I did take note that a lot of those guys in there are seniors, and that gives me a lot of hope that normally the seniors can really be relied upon. They've learned, they've gotten big, they've gotten strong, they've got game time, they've had starts under their belts, and so. Hopefully we're knocking back those Georgia State interior defenders and creating some creases, dominate ball. You know the deal: ball control, ball control, ball control. So
I'm always watching the quarterback in those openers. I'm always watching like the offense. So now, Rob, you're going to get my focus to those 3 guys now on that first series, and I want to see what they're going to be able to do because, like you said, Georgia State's pretty formidable. They have a lot of talent coming back, as do a lot of teams do on Army schedule. So, man, it's a good test. It's a road test. It's away from Mikey Stadium. They had a lot of success at Mikey Stadium under Jeff Monken. See what they can do on the road against a really good team, and it should be a lot of fun. Really appreciate you coming on tonight, Rob. Thanks. We really appreciate you sharing your memories and your thoughts on the current project and your time after West Point. This podcast will be on the all major podcast platforms in audio form, and we also have a YouTube channel, Black Knight Nation, where you'll be able to rewatch this podcast. Just any final thoughts for you, Rob, before we wrap it up?
Well, I just want to tell you thanks a lot, Sal, for what you're doing. I think it's great, this Black Knight Nation. I watched a couple of the other podcasts, and it's great to hear from a lot of these guys who I know over the years and hear some of their stories. So thank you, and thanks for having me on. And go Army! Let's beat Georgia State, brother.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Rob.
All right, take care.